Hello, I'm Laurel Trahan from Age at Home. Age at Home is a non-medical senior home care agency based in Concord, New Hampshire. We provide home care services as well as geriatric care management services. Typical home care service is designed to help folks age in place in their homes, to be able to enhance their lives, and to be able to provide some supplemental services that make things a little bit easier. So typical home care, a non-medical agency like ours, provides light housekeeping services, transportation, medication reminders, as well as pet care. And then we can also help with some more of the bathing assistance and dressing and companionship, trying to enhance independence and quality of life. Well, there's a variety of different types of models. There's medical home care models, non-medical home care models. Those are typically the classic home care services that are based on an hourly service, private pay. Some are paid through Medicaid for short-term stints, which is considered a skilled need when a client is recovering from an illness and may need some physical therapy, a nurse visit, occupational therapy. That is a more medical model for home care. There's a variety of different types of programs to help allow folks to be able to age in place at home. The classic home care service is billed at an hourly rate, and clients choose how many hours they would like. It can be anywhere for our agency, anywhere from 2 hours all the way up to 24-hour care. There's other programs called the live-in program, where a client may hire a couple of different employees who split a week. They actually don't physically move into a client's home, but they share, they're there for 24 hours at a time and may do 2 to 3 days stints in the client's home. It's a little less expensive, but there's a lot of different stipulations around how long the employee needs to be able to sleep at night, their break time, sort of the labor law issues around that. There is a consumer-directed model, which is where a client is responsible for hiring and providing the supervision of the employee, but the employee is paid through an agency, and so their workman's comp is taken care of, their taxes, the payroll piece is done for the client. But the client is responsible for having a backup plan. You know, if their employee leaves, they need to be responsible for hiring a new person and doing the job search and whatnot. Another model, which is a national model, is the home share model. And that involves where it's more of a landlord-tenant agreement. And the tenant agrees for a reduced rental fee to provide certain services that the landlord and the tenant agree upon before they move in together. So that may be that the tenant agrees to live in the client's home and mow the lawn every summer and take care of the snow plowing in the winter, and maybe cook dinner every night or a few nights a week. So they work on a shared relationship there. It's a very popular model across the nation. The hourly home care piece can really fit into any of those models. It's a really great, if it's not chosen as the first choice, it's a great model to be able to provide backup systems to any of the home share, the live-in program, as well as supplement to some of the skilled care, Medicare, more medical model piece. In New Hampshire, we do have a licensure to become a home care agency. The Department of Health and Human Services oversees our licensure and has developed a set of regulations that all home care agencies go by. You need to apply to become licensed, and then you need to show proof that you're following all the regulations. And some of those regulations are involve the pre-employment hiring practices, which involve making sure that employees go through background checks, criminal background, the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Service checks. They also have to have a TB test and a physical. And then they set standards for training, the minimum amount of training that needs to be required and completed before the employee starts. And that type of training ranges from proper body mechanics, infection control, the aging process, nutrition, really important topics for an employee to be confident and ready to be able to go out and care for seniors in the community. And then they also have regulations around what we need to do to prepare clients when they start services. So making sure that they have a rate sheet, that they're aware of all the rates that could be charged, that there's an agreement that they've signed, that they have a copy of that agreement, that they receive the client rights, which is a New Hampshire regulation. In different states, I know Vermont does not have a licensing requirement, but most of the other New England states do. And you can just go on to the computer and search whether or not your state has a licensing requirement for home care agencies. For a non-medical home care agency, there's a variety of different types of services that are offered. Everything from light housekeeping to transportation, making meals, helping with the grocery list, taking folks to the grocery store, and we do medication reminders. Really, it's sort of like bringing the benefits of an assisted living community into the client's home. It's very individualized. It really depends on what the client needs and what they want, most importantly. We can take the dog for a walk. We can help take care of the pets. If there's cats in the home, do the litter box. All those little things that can become a little cumbersome if you're having some mobility difficulties. And then, you know, we're kind of like little detectives, I like to say, when we're working with clients, in a very subtle way, of course, but making sure that, you know, the client is changing their clothes, and you know, that the employee is reporting if they're noticing any kinds of cognitive changes or mobility changes. You know, if the mail starts to pile up and there's some changes there with the way that they're organizing and managing their household, it's important for us to be able to help and be proactive and look into what's going on. And we often, when we're doing our intakes and as we have that relationship with our clients, try to help them look at some easier ways to be able to manage their daily tasks in the home. So that may be setting up a pill box that's delivered from the pharmacy so that they don't need to think about, you know, which medication they need to take at what time. And then we can come in and do reminders and make sure that the client is actually taking their medication. So again, it's very individualized. Some of the things that we're not able to do are administer medications. We can't actually fill pill boxes as a non-medical agency. We're not allowed to do any sort of wound care. We can't mow the lawn. We can't shovel the snow. You know, I actually have in my agreement, because we get asked for all sorts of things, but we're not allowed to run power tools and, you know, those sorts of things. But you know, really anything that's light housekeeping and non-medical, we're pretty flexible in the types of services we provide, and most agencies are. A typical case for us, is when a client is really struggling with some mobility difficulties, is just struggling to stay at home, and maybe the beginning stages of some cognitive issues, which is impacting their day-to-day life. I gave this some great thought and looked at our clients, and most of our clients start services with us with just a couple of hours. And it may be a couple of hours a week with family supplementing some pop-in visits, or it may be a couple hours a day. And usually what we're there for is just to try to help make sure that everything is running smoothly, that the client is either, has all the things that they need to be able to make dinner, make meals, that they have their medications at home, that we help with laundry, and it can be difficult washing floors and doing some more of that heavier work when you have some mobility difficulties. So trying to just help make sure that everything is running smoothly and the client has everything that they need to be safe for the day. And then having somebody come in the next day or a couple days later to make sure that there's everything that they need. There isn't any sort of crisis that's going on, that the client has had enough to drink. There's, difficulties around this time of year, especially with making sure there's proper hydration. But most of our clients are fairly independent, and I'd say a typical client starts out with that type of service, just a few hours, and then as needs change, they may add on, or they may look at a different living situation which occurs. I'd say the difference between having a housekeeper service and a home care agency is that the employees are trained to really keep an eye out for any sort of changes. They're trained in the aging process to understand the difference between what may be a normal part of aging and what may be a cognitive change. And we have a relationship, an ongoing relationship with that client. Of course, with the client's permission, to be able to report any sort of changes to a family member or their partner or spouse, so that as things change, we're able to keep the same person, that same employee, that same caregiver with the client, because we're able to provide that ongoing training. So if they then need assistance with bathing and dressing, a typical housekeeping service is not going to be able to provide that, but a home care agency could. There are various types of reactions when we are going into a client's home for the first time, describing the types of services. Most clients are not really fond of the idea of having some stranger come into their home. They may not necessarily show that initially, but I'd say most clients are, a little wary of that. And home care service is really built on relationships. It's from that initial visit when they are meeting with either myself or the field care manager, to meeting the employee for the first time. We do individualized one-on-one, what we call a meet and greet, prior to the client starting services, so they can meet the caregiver and see if it's a good fit for them. But it's difficult, and what I try to explain to clients is, they're in charge. They have the control. This is their home. We're not coming in to change things or change their routine, or if they like their towels folded a certain way, they need to let us know, and we will make sure that we're doing it the way that they like to have it done. It's about promoting independence, and just we're a little bit of the right hand man or lady there to help out with some of the areas that they request help in. We're not there to go in and take over, and that helps, and really just that initial whether or not they feel comfortable with the caregiver the first time that the caregiver is there. We do a lot of follow-up and check-in and make sure that it's working for both parties. And once that relationship is developed, I've seen some really incredible transformations with clients' quality of life. I have been a caregiver while running the business. I had a client that I started with when I first started. The business is 5 years old now. And when I first started the business, I had a woman who needed some companionship. It was just a couple hours a week, and we really had a great bond, and she suffered from Alzheimer's disease. And so as the business grew, I still continued to see her on a weekly basis, and went through the changes of her living with her spouse. He had hired us initially because he just needed a break to be able to go out and do some of the things that he needed to do to be able to take care of himself. And I've watched the transformation for her going through the progress of her disease. And it's been very difficult on the family. And the reason why I continued to stay involved was that relationship that I had with her. They really treasured that. They knew it was just a couple of hours a week, but it was time that mom had with somebody that was, a different relationship other than the nurses that were caring for her as she transitioned into the nursing home. It was another set of eyes. It was somebody that their mother still recognized as, her friend, and it really brought a lot of value to the family. And they invite me to family functions, and it's been a real treasure. So wonderful. And it happens with our employees all the time. It's the most rewarding part of being in this business. That is a difficult question. I mean, it takes some time to smooth over when a client is really resistant to trying home care services. Some of the reactions, it's a loss of control for some folks when they feel that they have to have somebody coming into their home, and just understanding that is the first step, and really working on building that relationship, I would say, is the other really important piece. I see this a lot with clients when a spouse needs to have some respite care, and the spouse who needs the care recipient, really it's a feeling of burden that they need to then have somebody come in and stay with them. It can bring up a lot of emotional difficulties for the spouse, and it's incredibly important for the well spouse to be able to take that time and do some things for themselves, and care for themselves, because it's incredibly stressful to be a full-time caregiver. And we see this more and more as families transition more in our society into caring for our loved ones, seniors especially. Whereas the last 10 years, families have been more disconnected and at a distance, and we're seeing that change a little bit in our culture, slowly but surely. And some of the tactics that I would tell clients to use is explain that we're there for them. Start out with having us go in and just do some light housekeeping. Explain that we're there to be able to help the well spouse with getting some of the tasks done that they feel is important to them, that have been neglected because they're helping out in other areas. That's been a useful tactic, I think, especially. And then if we can find the right fit and really coach the caregiver, not to be intrusive, just kind of blend into the house, and slowly build that relationship, That's what I've really seen to be most successful. And then the match. So if it's a male client and he used to have some certain hobbies like hunting and fishing, if he's interested or the spouse thinks it would be appropriate, I may match him with a male caregiver who has similar interests, who's obviously a good housekeeper, and try to work that in so that conversation can flow a little more naturally, and that helps. The ratio for male to female home care aides really is 98% female and 2% male. We would love to have more male caregivers in the field, and it's gaining a little more popularity. It's a crucial role, but currently it's about 98% women to 2% men for our agency. When you have to take that step, whether it be the care recipient, the spouse that needs the care, or an individual living independently, taking that step to have help come in definitely can bring up a lot of difficult emotions around dealing with the disease, their end of life, what they're not able to do anymore. Seeing somebody come in who's then able to do all the things that they used to do, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult time for folks. And, we really just acknowledge that, are empathetic, we discuss it, and try to help move through some of those painful feelings. Because it can be a lot of denial about where they are currently with what they're able to do. I often hear clients say, well, my brain says, it's fine to climb up on the ladder and clean the gutters out. I've done this for 50 years, but they haven't caught up with what their body is physically able to do, and there's a little bit of denial there. So it's difficult, very difficult. That loss of control and independence. Yes, you should absolutely shop around when you're looking for provider for your loved one. There are certain standards, and some of the questions that I would ask would be, one, whether or not they're licensed as a home care agency, whether or not the employee is hired as their employee, or if they're contractors, subcontractors, then they don't have the supervision piece over their employees or contractors, whether or not they're insured and bonded. And then I would ask a lot of questions around their hiring practices. How do they recruit employees? What's the interview process like? Do they do certain background checks? What kind of background checks? Every agency is a little bit different. Some do pre-employment drug testing, others do state background checks, some do national background checks. So it really is very individualized per the agency. And I really feel strongly it's important to interview in person a couple of different agencies before you make your choice. You'll be able to tell who has pretty good communication right off. If folks are coming late to appointments, they're all telltale signs that you really need to keep an eye out for. I think, what I see the most challenging piece for clients with some of the other agencies is where they have rotating staff coming in, so they're not able to build that relationship. The turnover may be really high. It's difficult for clients to have that kind of change all of the time. And then the other piece is the communication. And really, you're really going to find that out through word of mouth. You know, asking your neighbors, talking to friends, trying to find out in that local community who really stands out, because reputation is everything. And you may see a lot of commercials on TV for some, you know, bigger home care agencies, and some of their reputations may be wonderful and others not so much. So it's really important to look past some of the bigger advertising. There's a lot of websites out there where you can look for home care, and you may not see some of the smaller agencies that are out there. It's not because the quality isn't there, but more so that they have to pay a large sum of money to be on these national websites. So it's important to understand that and not take everything at face value, and really meet with different agencies and sit down and ask the questions. The other piece is their cancellation policy. That is something that I've seen come up more and more, where agencies require a lengthy cancellation policy, you know, some up to 30 days, where if you have a change in your life and don't need services or need to take a break from services, you would be required to pay for that full 30 days of whatever schedule you've agreed to. And other agencies like ours are just 24-hour notice. So that's a big difference and something important to investigate. Our agency is a smaller agency. We have less than 100 employees, so we know our employees very well, and that is, I think, first and foremost. You have to have a good understanding of your employees and have a relationship with them. And initially, when our employees are hired, we have them go through an employee profile. So they check off what their hobbies are, interests, places they visited, traveled, also, you know, some of their hobbies and interests. I said that twice. Whether or not they have animals. So we get a kind of an inventory of our employees. And then when we're out meeting our clients, you know, we always have those things in the back of our head. You know, well, Sue's really into horseback riding, and when I go out and meet a client and their interests were horses, I try to work that schedule around, as long as the personalities I think would be a good fit, try to work that schedule around for that employee to be able to work with this client. So it is an ever-changing puzzle that goes on, but really I think the most important piece is having a good understanding of your client's personality, their likes, their dislikes, asking the questions, and then also knowing your employees well. And we do those initial meet and greets so that the employee can get to know the client and vice versa, and then the check-in to make sure that it works out okay. And if it doesn't, we try another employee. That happens. That happens where we need to change employees. And we explain to our employees upon hire that these situations can occur. I mean, it's just not natural for everybody to get along with everybody. And so we're really upfront with our employees that, you know, it's okay if you feel like this client isn't a good fit for you. And we may say to you at some point that the client has requested a change, you know, because of X, Y, and Z. And being honest about it, and we just move on and we introduce a new employee and hope that that's a good fit. And sometimes it may take a few introductions before that right fit is found, and that's okay. We just keep trying, and eventually we succeed. I think that's really our specialty, where we can handle some more challenging cases like that. There are a set standard of practices that the Department of Health and Human Services puts forth, regulations that every home care agency needs to abide by when hiring staff. And with screening staff, it's really, there's a lot of practices out there. Some folks do group interviews, some just do phone screening, some folks do one-on-one interviewing. So it's important to ask those questions, again, when you're looking at home care agencies to see. I really feel like you need to follow your gut instinct. I do all of the initial interviewing for all our employees, and you can really get a sense from some of the background, especially the job changing and the resume issues. Maybe some red flags might come up, and just digging a little bit deeper into that and trying to work through, what may be the challenge with this employee and whether or not it's something that can be worked through or not. Background checks are incredibly important and are required in New Hampshire as a standard of practice for all employees coming on board. There's also the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services registry, where the state has a registry if somebody has been convicted of abuse, neglect, or exploitation with a senior. Bless you. That is right. Sorry. That's a registry that we can check and make sure that there aren't any convictions there with employees, prior candidates, I should say. We do background checks, reference checks, usually at least 3 personal and 3 professional reference checks. And after you kind of go through some of that, you tend to see the bigger picture on whether or not they would be a good fit for your agency or not. There is an aging resource center here in New Hampshire. It's called ServiceLink. It's a free resource center that has a variety of different types of services. Again, it's free, and they can help with directing you to an agency like ours who's either vetted or licensed by the state. They keep a registry so that you can have the information about the 8 different agencies. They can also help you with a Medicare and Medicaid consultation, let you know if you're on the right plan for your Medicare. They can help you with the process of getting your Medicaid paperwork started. They can explain what resources are out there for, may it be grants. There's some new programs that the VA has for veterans. Ask the question is important. Finding out whether or not your client was served our country, was a veteran. And so it's a free resource, and I find it incredibly valuable for clients. They can also help with support groups for clients who are having some difficulties with struggling with an illness. There's support groups out there for family caregivers, support groups out there specifically for spouses caring for their loved one. So there's just, every state is different. Again, here in New Hampshire it's called ServiceLink, and there's one in almost every county. And across the country, if you just look up Aging Resource Center in your state, you should be directed to the title of the agency in your area. I have seen many difficult transformations turn into just wonderful relationships. The benefit that a family sees or the spouse sees from us being able to provide a little bit more of a quality of life for the client receiving the services is invaluable. We had a gentleman who just had some real difficulties with his mobility. He was suffering from Parkinson's, and having to have somebody come in and help him he was just adamantly against it. He was just felt the feelings of losing control over being able to go out independently in the yard and do some gardening and whatnot. Was just, he couldn't even fathom having to have somebody there with him. And it took some time, but the spouse needed to have a break, and we worked through it. And I was able to partner him with a gentleman They were both veterans, and the relationship that happened was just amazing. And they actually, my employee would take this gentleman out fishing on a boat, and he had the ability to be able to help the client onto a pontoon boat with a walker. It was very safe. But the joy that this client received from being able to have that independence back, even though he needed a little bit of help, he was able to overcome that feeling of losing his independence and loss of control by seeing the benefit that this gentleman provided. And it's amazing, amazing transformation. And he really became very fond of this employee, and they spent more and more time together. And I believe truly that it allowed the client to be able to stay in the home longer, for the spouse to be able to take a break. She was very ill when we first started because she had been essentially worrying and caring for her husband 24 hours a day because he couldn't be left out of her sight. This really helped her live a healthier life, and it gave a lot of value back to his life. So
it gave them both freedom and quality of life.
Freedom and quality, yes, absolutely. Our primary focus is with seniors, but my background is working with folks who have developmental disabilities. And as long as a person is over the age of 18, we are able to provide services for them. So we can provide some respite to families if they have a person who may need some support, whether it be helping with bathing and dressing and companionship, going out into the community. Those are services that we can provide for folks who are not seniors at this time, who are in the younger age bracket. We've also had clients who are in their 40s and 50s who have been having some other challenging disease process with MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, some difficult disease process to go through. I actually had a younger woman who was in her 20s who was suffering from Lyme disease, and she wasn't able to get to the grocery store and do her light housekeeping around the house. And so we went in and helped her with those tasks and provided transportation. We are able to provide services for folks who have developmental disabilities or varying abilities, I like to say.